Welcome to Wander Mode, a podcast that wanders through topics such as entrepreneurship, traveling, and mamahood. As a teacher turned entrepreneur and a mama to one, I am sharing my tips and tricks to maintain harmony in a multifaceted life. Let's wander. Today, I have the pleasure of interviewing Aimee Olson. Aimee is a productivity and organizing coach who collects moments, not things. She is currently living full-time on the road in an RV, and she helps others simplify through her business, Life Done Simply. But just like I share on this podcast all the time, we are multifaceted individuals. And a facet of Aimee that I absolutely love is her obsession with the Minnesota State Fair. You can find her on Instagram at Memories on a Stick, where she calls herself an unofficial Minnesota State Fair ambassador and believes that pronto pups equal world peace. So welcome, Aimee, to the Mom Boss in Wander Mode podcast.
Thank you.
I am super excited to share this episode at the start of a new year because my hope is that listeners can gather some great nuggets about setting goals and getting organized for 2024. Can you start us out by telling us a little bit about your journey into the world of organizing, coaching, and speaking?
Absolutely. So most organizers and productivity coaches like myself enter this space, enter this career as a second, third, or fourth career. So we all have different reasons we come to this, but ultimately it's usually through our own experience. And my journey is no different. In 2014, I was the president and CEO of a company that I had built. It was a very successful company, something that I built up from the ground up. And though I was very successful in that career, I had reached a tipping point. I was overwhelmed. I felt like a different person every day when I went to work. I felt like I was putting on a mask and becoming someone entirely different to make it work. And I realized that I had entered this career, I had built this business for someone else, for something else, that it was completely misaligned with my own values and my own goals. And that was a really tough pill to swallow because, when you're building a business, what you're trying to do is build something big and successful. And I hadn't realized that I didn't build it in a way that was aligned with who I was, right? And ultimately what I needed to be fulfilled and content. And so through a lot of work and several years, I realized that I needed to leave that career. I needed to leave that business that I built and do something entirely different. And the first thing I needed to do was really get in touch and get aligned with my own values and really find out, what did I need? What did I want? What were my goals versus these goals and these values that I had taken on from the outside world, right? These other outside influences. And so through that process, I say what I was doing was right-sizing my life. I was evaluating everything. I was looking at the things around me. I was looking at how I spent my money, how I spent my time, and really noticing that misalignment. And through that very laborious process and that inner work, I realized that I have a real passion for helping others do the same. Though I wasn't expecting that other people were on my exact journey and my exact path, I realized that there was a connection, that the clutter around us was simply us being misaligned with our values, our goals. And so in 2016, I started Life Done Simply with the intention of helping people get aligned with their values and their goals, declutter their lives, right-size their lives, and really get on a path towards true contentment. In 2018, I pivoted that business again when my partner and I decided to move into a 180 square foot RV, hit the road, and travel full time with our dog. And so we've been doing that ever since, and just constantly keeping myself open to what it means to pivot and keep myself aligned with my values.
I love that you went from recognizing that clutter is simply just all the things that exist out there that don't align with who we really are and what our goals are, and that you made such a big decision as selling all of your stuff and moving into this small space. Now, did that provide, or I guess cause, other interesting challenges to occur in terms of organizing and decluttering? Because now you're working and living in this incredibly small space. So although you've simplified in a lot of aspects, did that create a different challenge for you attempting to align to these new goals that you're setting for yourself?
Yes. Yes. I say that it created space for the real work to come to the surface. So often we'll blame our schedules or the clutter or commitments or whatever it is that's creating overwhelm in our lives. We want to place blame on these things. Once I eliminated the unnecessary, the necessary could speak, but the necessary wasn't always positive. When you're living that pared down, simplified life, you have more awareness, you have more energy and space to recognize other things that might need work. And so there was a lot of work that went with that. Also, the process of decluttering, it's easy to romanticize that process. It's easy to think, okay, all I need to do is just get rid of everything and then my life will be great. But what we fail to recognize is all of that stuff didn't just magically arrive in our lives, right? We invited it in. And so the work began on, okay, how do I stop from inviting that in as well? I've done the work of removing everything, but that doesn't mean that the flow of things isn't still there at the door.
And I appreciate you sharing that part of the process, because I think sometimes you see other influencers in the organizing space that are showing these methods that you think, wow, if my closet only looked like, or my home only looked like, therein lies the perfect solution for all of my problems. But what you're saying is that's actually not the solution to the problem. It's addressing more of what is bringing those things into our life in the first place.
Yeah, I say most people have a limiting belief that they have little control over their time, space, and energy. And those are the areas that we invite clutter into. And they believe the myth that organizing that clutter is going to eliminate the overwhelm. It's not about organizing the clutter. It's truly about that right sizing process. You'll hear me use right sizing versus decluttering because I think decluttering has somewhat of a negative connotation. So right sizing is whatever you need to eliminate is okay. It can be little, it can be a lot, it can fluctuate, but the magic is in that. It's not in reorganizing it. It's not in some little tip or trick. It's not in a new product. And that, I think I realized that early in my process because again, I was looking around and going, why am I so attached to maintaining this lifestyle that's making me really miserable? And I realized I had kind of fallen for that myth that as long as you have an organized home, as long as you have a successful business, as long as you have X, Y, and Z, you should be happy and content. And I knew that that wasn't the case. So when I started the business, I knew that I didn't want my business to be that. I didn't want to sell that promise to people. I wanted to instead really compel them to think about why the clutter's there, why they're looking to romanticize the organizing process, and really digging deeper into that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And we talked a little bit prior to clicking record about this, but how do you see the impact of things like social media and HGTV? How do you see that in this business? Are those things that you're having to actively fight against? I know because I follow you on social media, but I very much see this authentic message coming through from you. But how are you as a business owner fighting against that? And then when you're working with a client in particular, what are some strategies that you're attempting to use to go against those simple fixes?
Yeah, I think we're all susceptible to that dopamine hit that social media gives us. And I've constantly, since the beginning of my business, I've been in a struggle with social media because it does sell you on that romanticizing of the process, that that's all you need. Look at this fantastic life. But we know social media isn't real life. Unfortunately, when I'm working with a client, whether we're in their home or we're just going through a coaching process, they have consumed all of that romanticizing. And if they cannot execute it the way they see it, they feel immense shame, They feel that it's hopeless, that they just must be the exception. And so I've really struggled with what social media is doing for my clients, well, all of us, but specifically my clients, and making sure that I am not contributing to that negative message that they internalize, that their home isn't good enough, it's not aesthetically pleasing enough, that the answer is always more. They need to be doing more, they need to be buying more, constantly working on their home or their life, and really bringing them back to, what do you need? Not what you're being sold on social media, not what you're being sold by the media or retailers even, but what are your values? What are your goals? And so to answer your question about what do I do with my clients to help them get there, is right out of the gate, every single one of my clients goes through my Simply Aligned process, which is, that's just a fancy marketing term, but it's essentially identifying their core values so we can use those core values when we are prioritizing their time and space, when we are doing the right sizing process. We use what they need to determine the actions they need to take. Because when I started working with clients, I really noticed something that was very troubling to me. Most of those clients had a hard time identifying what was essential in their lives. If I sat them down and said, should we keep this? What do you think? Does this add value to your life? They could not answer the question. They looked to me to make the decision as the quote unquote professional. And I was really troubled by this because it was so disempowering. Because what happens when I'm not there to help them make that decision? They're going to slide back into their old habits, into those accumulation habits, those overcommitment habits. And so I realized I need every single one of my clients to know exactly what their core values are. I need them to have a rough idea of what their broader goals are. And then we're going to use those goals and we're going to use those values as a compass in deciding what goes, what stays. And that, I think, is helpful. It's not a perfect process, but again, it puts the power in their hands, just like I needed to do with myself when I started the process.
I greatly appreciate you sharing that because I grew up in a house where my mom has a lot of sentimental attachment to a variety of things because things might be useful down the road. And I, however, ended up with this personality where I need my home to feel minimal in terms of the collection of stuff. And I think if I were a client, I would definitely be on the side of initially thinking, I have to accept this beautiful system, right? I have to go out and buy 50 totes to organize all of the things in my pantry perfectly, or I have to adopt that method of folding my pants into thirds so that they can all like perfectly fit into a drawer and this, that, and the other thing. And one of the things that I recognized about myself is that some of those systems just don't simply work for me because of my lifestyle or having a kiddo in the house. And I've had to find my own systems that work. For example, I don't fold any of my daughter's clothes. They come straight out of the dryer and I do everything in drawers and everything just lays one on top of the other in the drawer. So that simplifies something for me. And I love that you're coming in saying, I'm not going to teach you this system because then I have to be here to continue to implement the system, but rather, what can we do for you that's sustainable?
Absolutely. And I kind of want to go back to even the core values, because when I say core values, some people will go, oh, that's a little woo-woo-y. And how is that tied to our clutter? It is absolutely tied to our clutter because we have these clutter tendencies of like misunderstanding. So I say the belief that saying no may come off as selfish or hurtful, that others' values trump your own, or lacking confidence in our own values. So a belief that you may not get this item or opportunity again, or you may need it in the future, so you keep it, or a clutter tendency of adopting the values and goals of others, a belief that you should be doing what other people are doing. And boy, do we see that a lot in the business building space, or a belief that you need to be part of the group. Everything comes down to our values, and our clutter tendencies are no different. So when we know what those core values are, it could be stability, it could be contribution to others, it could be accountability, it could be joy, it could be things as fun as like zealousness. But when we know what those are, we can look at the stuff around us, the physical stuff, the commitments we've made, all the clutter, and we can go, does this align with who I want to be or who I want to be out in the world or how I want others to treat me? And it's so much easier because it peels back that layer of, you're absolutely right. Like, is this something I picked up from my mom? Is this something I picked up from a friend? Is this something I picked up from someone I look up to? Or a societal pressure. And so to me, connecting those core values with the clutter has just been such a game changer. And yes, it makes me a little bit different of a professional organizer and coach, but I have the confidence that I've given my clients a compass that they can use when they're with me or without me. And yes, it needs to be calibrated occasionally, and I give them the tools to do that as well. Asking aligning questions, developing a practice of really pausing, slowing down, and taking the time to determine if something aligns before committing or before accepting. So it's a little woo woo, but it works. It works because it really gets my clients to understand that the stuff around us didn't just appear. We invited it. Now we just need to know why.
I think sometimes those are the hardest parts of ourselves to evaluate and maybe understand specifically what it is that we're looking for in ourselves when we're trying to identify those core values. So do you have a real concrete example of this was a value that a client had or that I had, and then this is kind of how we approached that?
Mm-hmm. I will use probably the most common case that I come across, which is clients will have the core value that I love to give gifts. I'm a gift giver. There's some people who say that's my love language. But either way, that just tells me it's a core value of yours that you like to give. You're a giver. But wrapped up in that can be some other values that maybe don't necessarily align with that, which might be that it has to be a physical item. And devaluing what a true gift can be. Again, the gift of time, the gift of attention. And so a lot of the times I'll have clients with that gift giving love language. And we just ask, what is it about the act of giving the thing that's so important to you? Because it's also creating some misalignment, because sometimes that means that there's some clutter in their home, right? Because they're accumulating things for others. So we know that the giving is important, but we also know that the accumulation to give is creating overwhelm. And it's just creating that confidence in that your core value isn't giving a physical item. It's coming down to really, what are you after? And then recognizing that the clutter isn't necessary to honor that core value. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And such funny timing, I think, especially going into the holidays where all of us are just on this rat race. Because again, societally, there's just this expectation that this time of year is about gift giving and celebrating together. And it's interesting that you're talking about this as your example, because I was just at a little one's birthday party and he didn't want to open any of his presents. And he was completely overwhelmed by the whole experience. But as you're talking about that, it really got me thinking that for as much as sometimes people value gift giving, you also have to be conscious about who's receiving that on the other side. And in some ways, their values surrounding that. Would that be correct?
Absolutely. And I think where people get into trouble with that boundary is they aren't clear about their values. They may know, like you, like, I like things minimal, or, I don't want a lot of stuff, or it creates some inner chaos, a sensory issue. They know all the feelings, but they aren't clear on how it connects to their core values. So I would say once you are really clear about your values and understand them and how they show up in your life, you're more easily able to communicate that with those around you. Again, that fear of misunderstanding, the clutter tendency, a belief that saying no may come off as selfish or hurtful. No more. I don't want it. And we've all dealt with that in our lives where we didn't want to receive something because it didn't align with our values. So one thing I always ask people to think about when we're really talking about clutter tendencies and getting connected with their values is think about a time that you knowingly or unknowingly brought clutter into your life. So it can be something physical, something mental, emotional, like a commitment. Ask yourself, when did it come into my life? Why you think you might have let it in? And what tendency was involved? And that will tell you what skill, what practice you need to hone. It could be that fear of missing out, that fear of scarcity, that you may need it or you might not get this opportunity again, or that I don't want to come off hurtful or selfish. That confidence in your own values will help you communicate that. So understanding why, and then asking, okay, what would you have needed to make a better decision? A more values aligned decision if you could do it over again. And communication is so important. We have to understand that other people are living by their values as well, but that doesn't mean that ours are less important. We just need to be clear about it and then understand how we can communicate that. I just think that there's a lot of frustration with one another in these gift-giving situations and not a lot of clarity, right? There's a lot of emotion, but not a lot of clarity.
I loved the question process of asking yourself, so now what do I need to do about it based on how it's making me feel? I'm very much in this season of what I guess I would call mental clutter, because as we're starting our business, I feel inundated by the to-do lists and a lot of the things that are happening on social media. And I'm personally not really much of a social media person. And so feeling really weighed down by having to post every day and get reels out there and stories out there. And how do I tell people about our course and all of those things? So if I were to, I guess, be honest with myself about what I'm sitting in right now, part of my daily overwhelm or maybe my crabbiness is because I have invited clutter in. What is the next step once you've identified, oops, I just let this in and now this is a toxic or hard aspect in my life?
Right. So I would say it's an easy strategy once you've practiced it, but it's just asking a few more aligning questions. So it sounds like in this situation, does it align with your values and goals? I mean, that could be tricky, but I ask 3 questions in concert with one another. So none of these 3 questions are more important than the other. Does this thing or commitment align with my values? Yes or no? Does this add value to my life? Because that can be different too. We can have things in our lives that add value that aren't necessarily aligned with our own values and goals, and that's okay. Or 3, how might my life be more with less? That's a phrase that I took from the minimalist that I learned in 2014, but I use it every single day. I think that's the magic question is, even if something aligns with your values and goals of building your business through social media, whatever, or even if it adds value to your life, right? So it might be something around the home that really makes your life easier. To ask yourself, how might my life be better with less of this thing, of this commitment, of this expectation? That is where you get to decide, yes, it's important, but maybe not as important as I first thought. And the answer, if it's yes, like this is valuable, asking yourself, when am I free of this commitment? What am I sacrificing to make space for this thing? And those 2 questions right there give you additional permission to either let the item go now or at least set some kind of subconscious timeline to know that when this no longer adds value to my life or when it is causing me overwhelm, stress, whatever you're feeling right now, that it's okay to let it go sometime. Everything we pick up is something we can set down at any time. We just have to ask ourselves the right questions. And if you decide, no, this doesn't align with my values anymore, maybe it did, but it doesn't anymore, or no, this doesn't add value to my life, then let it go. Be confident that the practice of asking yourselves the questions is you being intentional. And so you should be very confident in the decision to let it go if that's where you land.
Wow, that series of questions is so powerful. How many years has it taken for you to get to that system? And is that a system that, because you've done it so much now, is an easy practice for you? Or does it still take work even at this point in your journey?
I've been working on, some of those questions since 2014. I will say that I developed the practice of asking those aligning questions full time in my life in 2018. And it is just second nature for me to ask those. Now, that's not to say that I don't get tripped up sometimes, that I don't oops, accidentally forget to ask myself those questions, right? I can invite clutter in just like everyone else. I am susceptible to the marketing schemes of social media, Target, all the retailers. But it is easy. And just asking yourself, the first one, how might my life be more with less, is just giving yourself permission to acknowledge that, yes, even if this thing is a great opportunity, even if it is something of value or something that I've always dreamed of, do I still need it? Is it really going to move the needle? So when I ask myself those first 3 questions, those aligning questions, it's easy to follow up with those clarifying questions. Now, I love questions. I love the practice of doing the inner work. So the other one I'll throw out there is the 3 whys. So if you're presented with an opportunity or you're at the store and you want to pick up something more, even though you're dealing with clutter at home, asking yourself 3 whys, like, why do I want this? And there's the surface level of the desire. Whatever your answer is going to be surface. But asking yourself the second why is, why do I feel that way? Why do I have that desire? And whatever answer you come to will pop up. And then you ask yourself the third why and go, what am I hoping to achieve by saying yes, by buying this thing, by accepting this offering, whatever it might be? What am I ultimately hoping to achieve? And just that quick why? Really challenging yourself to get to the root of the desire is sometimes enough for you to go, okay, I don't need it. And I think social media is a great place to practice this because, well, why? Well, this is what everyone's doing, right? I need to be out on social media. I need to be spending all my time out here and engaging. Okay, why? Why is that important? Well, because that's how I grow my business and that's how I'm going to connect with people or whatever. And then asking yourself that third why is going to bring up, okay, but what are you hoping to achieve? And that's where you will find that your ultimate goal is generally disconnected from that surface level desire, that thing you're being sold.
I know that I definitely need to start asking myself those whys. I'm a little less of a thing person, but asking myself those things as it relates to more of that mental clutter is definitely going to be helpful. Now, I want to put myself in the shoes of someone who's listening to this and saying, okay, Aimee, like, I love asking myself those whys. I can kind of get behind that, but I have this partner in my life that fill in the blank. How have you navigated asking yourself those whys and holding to your values while having a partner that may or may not be in the same place as you?
Yeah, it's going to go back to that limiting belief that I mentioned earlier. The limiting belief that we have little control over our time, space, and energy, that there's something else that has to be fixed in order for us to feel content, for us to find that fulfillment, for us to find that, whatever it is you're looking for. Well, if I could just get my husband on board, or if, well, I've got kids, easier said than done. We have to be the change we want to see. That all comes from within. So there is some acceptance involved that you have your core values. That does not mean that your spouse, that does not mean your children, that does not mean your mother-in-law has those same values, and understanding that and being okay with that. But being confident, and then hopefully in a relationship, in a household situation, just coming together and really, again, communicating those core values and making sure that you're not just putting your foot down and saying, we need to declutter this room because it stresses me out. Tying it back to your values and to maybe an overall household goal or personal goal, help explain to those around you what you need, right? They want to help you. People want to be supportive, but I really think it comes down to that limiting belief that you don't have control unless other people change, and that fear of communicating what your values are, that confidence that you need to say, hey, this is why. Yeah.
And what an impact you could have, really. It starts that slow ripple effect of, okay, I've communicated my needs in the hope that my family or the individuals that I share space with are going to honor that, and figuring out how to navigate those conversations where it can kind of be a win-win situation for everybody, a collective effort rather than an individual effort, which would have a much bigger impact on the individual's life that's trying to do the work.
Yeah. And I think most of us are guilty of getting into an all or nothing thinking. Like, we have to fix all these things and then it will be okay. And not realizing that When we're trying to achieve a goal, if it's just decluttering your home or if it's building a business, you cannot think of it all or nothing. You have to think, what's the change I can make in front of me, right? Where can I move the needle? And you'll be surprised, especially in the organizing part of this or decluttering, that when you make a sustainable change that you feel good about, you lead by example. And I always say it's very contagious. Those around you, especially those who love you, will feel that change and will follow you through that change. But again, it's got to be done with clarity. It's got to be done with confidence and not this limiting belief that you don't have control.
Yeah, really, it sounds like it comes back to being so intentional in so many ways. The last 2 weeks, really, for me, have been sitting in the word intention. And it's really your intention behind your decisions. It's your intention with what it is that you're wanting to have in your life and slowing yourself down enough that you can process that, but you can also communicate that and then put it into practice.
Yes. Yeah. And I've been sitting with slow down. So this has actually been an intention that I've been setting with now. This will be my third year. And a lot of the work that I'll be doing now in the upcoming year is still going to be around simply aligned and establishing the core values, but really helping people understand the connection between how we are constantly trying to rush through the process of decluttering, building a business, managing our schedule, etc. And how rushing creates, again, more discontentment. It creates us to make decisions that aren't aligned with our values, and really the importance of slowing down so we can hear ourselves. We can calibrate that inner compass and make the best decisions we can. They might be wrong, but that's okay because we know that they're intentional.
Slowing down and being intentional, I mean, those two things go hand in hand. When we're rushing, you're doing nothing with intention. And as you said, I feel like it invites more clutter in. It causes you to make mistakes, which then can actually be really costly for time. And I know that I'm finding that in myself. The more that I'm rushing, the more I'm inviting mistakes in, and then I'm having to go spend extra time on the back end fixing those things that I did when I thought I was trying to be a superwoman and be really productive.
Yeah.
Ah.
Yeah. And that's what clutter is. I didn't come up with this definition, but some very wise woman many years ago came up with it and said, clutter is just postponed decisions. The only thing I add to that is it's postponed decisions that aren't aligned with our values. So we accept things in and think, I'll deal with it later. But we never get around to really dealing with it later because we're not invested in it because they're not aligned with our values. They're not aligned with our goals until you reach a tipping point where you realize, okay, I have to do it all at once. It is really taking the time to be intentional is really important. That's why I believe so wholeheartedly. If you are going to start a decluttering journey, if you are looking at trying to manage your time more effectively, be a little bit more productive, really do the work of identifying your core values first. Then see where you're out of alignment. And you might be surprised when you start to look for those alignment issues, the work of correcting it might not be as difficult as you think it is.
A little easier to let those things go when you recognize they really don't do anything for you.
Absolutely.
So you shared a little bit about a goal for yourself this year is slowing down. Do you have any other goals that you're setting for yourself in 2024? Is that specific to your business and your personal life in general?
Yeah, I'm actually doing something that has been very challenging for me, which is another pivot, another transition in my business, and stepping away from in-home organizing completely. I'll still be working with existing clients until my services are no longer needed, but moving away from started my business is really, really scary. But again, through some strategic planning work, some vision and values work this year, I've realized what I built my business on no longer adds value and no longer aligns with my values and my goals. And where my passion truly lies is in the coaching, is in the public speaking, is in getting people to their aha moment. It's getting them to their tipping point to realizing, okay, I want to make a change. And it's been challenging because it's hard to let go of something that you've held on to for so long, something that's defined who you are. And so I'm really trying to be courageous in this upcoming year with that goal and just trusting the process. I feel like I can trust it when I'm leading with that intentionality of slow down, make sure I'm in alignment, and things will unfold the way they need to.
That is a really courageous shift for sure, because being in person with people compared to coaching and speaking, that's a very different skill set. And I know that I've seen you in your interviews on Fox and things like that. Would you consider yourself to already have some of those basic skills? Or would you say that is something that has come about as you're trying to transition your business toward that?
I've always had the fire in my belly for it. So when I speak in front of a group of individuals, no matter the size, it could be, 5, it could be 100. That's where the passion lies. That's where the fire is. Now, part of really establishing a goal and being strategic about how I achieve that goal, right? Because I have certain financial goals and engagement goals around that, is recognizing I have a lot to learn still. So I'm comfortable doing it. I've been doing it for a while. I've been a paid speaker now for the past couple of years, but recognizing that there's always room to grow and just doing that patiently. I'm generally not a very patient person when it comes to myself. I just want to do the thing. I get so excited about it. But I really have recognized in myself through working with other people that it's when I slow down and I'm patient that I kind of let the opportunities unfold the way they need to. I'm not forcing it, and the right doors are going to open for me. So I'm excited about it because it is truly what I'm passionate about, is seeing that light bulb moment when I've said something that somebody goes, oh my gosh, yes, I feel that, or yes, I can do that. Or, when maybe those people aren't feeling supported by those around them. They know that something's off. They feel misaligned. They feel overwhelmed, but they just don't know how to make that change. To be the person who can get them there, it's so fulfilling. So I'm following that fulfillment and worrying about the details later. But I do have a method of strategic planning that I step myself through every year, and just making sure that any goal that I'm setting is reasonable, it's realistic, it's sustainable, and that I'm taking action in some meaningful way every single week to just get better, right? So I'm not looking at a destination. I'm more of how can I get better along the journey, and then trusting that in the end, I'm going to be where I need to be.
And I'm really excited for you as you're sitting here sharing this journey toward being more of a coach and a speaker and focusing on that side, because like you said, sitting and watching people have light bulb moments, that was always my favorite thing about teaching. My students would be working really hard on a paper or trying to understand a concept, and all of a sudden you see this level of understanding just wash over them. And as you said, to be that person that was able to facilitate that level of understanding in another person is a really powerful thing.
Yes. And
It's huge.
I had that same experience years ago when I was in that other career building that business. I was at a women's business retreat, and we did some sort of exercise. I don't remember the exercise specifically, but essentially it was a personality exercise. And the facilitator came up to me afterwards and she said, I just want to ask you a few more questions about how you responded. And as we worked through it, that was my aha moment, that I went to work in the morning. When I went to my company to lead my employees, I became a different person than what I truly was inside. I was living these values and goals that belonged to some other hypothetical person. And it was through that aha moment, that exercise at that workshop, that I started my journey. So everyone has the opportunity to have that moment. They just have to be open to hearing it. I think of that woman often. I think of that experience and that weekend often, because you always go, what if I hadn't gone? Right. And so I think that moment has somewhat lit that fire in my belly to do the same for others.
I am so looking forward to seeing where that fire ends up taking you. And I know for anyone that is out there listening that is thinking, this is exactly what I needed to hear, and this is going to help me have more clarity around my goals for 2024, where can they find you in an effort to connect to some of the things that you're doing going forward?
Absolutely. They can join my email list at lifedonesimply.com. I am on all socials at Life Done Simply. I post fairly minimally, but I'm there to connect. I want to be wherever you are, but reach out, email me, let me know. You can set up a free consultation on my website as well. But also, I occasionally will do events or have public speaking events, especially in the Minnesota area. So signing up for the email list or checking out my website and the events listing, you'll be able to find me there.
Thank you, Aimee, for joining me on the Mom Boss in Wander Mode podcast. It was a pleasure sharing some space with you today. And to those of you listening to this episode in the new year, I wish you luck with setting up some goals that truly align with your values. If you wandered to this point in the episode, thank you for listening to the Wander Mode podcast. Please leave a review and subscribe. You can follow me on Instagram and Facebook at Wander Mode Co. Reach me by email at julie@wandermode.co. Until next time, wander on.